Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. We're starting our weekend off right. Everything you see on this show is for sale and in stock right now. Reach out to Tim Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. I put references, names, and when available, prices in the description below. If you're looking to sell a watch, we are always looking to build inventory. One watch or an entire collection, no upper limit on value paid. Guys, it's the same email address. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com to sell a watch. Let's jump straight in with something spectacular. I tantalized you with the thumbnail, and now here it is. This, of course, if you can see clearly, is the green-on-green Hulk. This is not the subsequent Kermit 2. This is the Hulk as we knew it from 2010 right up until last year. 40 millimeters. It's got a lovely gloss green Cerachrom bezel insert, a sunburst metallic dial that Rolex initially described as green gold when it launched the watch. And it does have gold content, but ultimately for cultural reasons, Rolex started soft pedaling the gold content of the dial. But make no mistake though, you still have that vibrant sunburst green, which is absolutely explosive in the light of my light box and radiant in natural sunlight. You have white gold for all of the hands and indices, such that they may not tarnish or oxidize over time. The bezel is 120 click and sublime to feel and hear. Let's have a listen. Sharp, but at the same time refined. It's mechanical, but not too chunky. A wonderful balancing act by Rolex. Now, the watch is 40 millimeters in diameter, triplock crown, 300 meters water resistant. Of course, you've got the glide lock system, so that if you want to size this watch, it's quite a bit more than standard Easy Link. You've got 20 millimeters of increment in 2 millimeter steps. So you can go all the way out over a dive suit, or you can use it to fine-tune the fit. Now, of course, the watch does feature a bracelet that's fixed by screws, no pins and sleeves here. This is Rolex in the modern day. And you can see on the wrist, it's actually more of a cushion case than a round case. And I guess that's sort of the story with most of the Rolex Oyster cases. They're not really round. Cover up the round bezel in crystal, and it looks more like a tonneau or a cushion case, which gives it an impressive wrist stance, though it's not thick. You can see it 12 millimeters thick. It is broad. It has more the look of a 42 or a 43 millimeter watch, which is why this is a 40 that wears well with a bigger wrist. Chronometer certified, 300 meters water resistant, still very well loomed. In fact, let's do a loom shot. As you can see, Rolex Chromolite loom, very expressive, handsome, distinctive, and of course there's that Mercedes hour hand, so you know exactly what you are looking at. I've often said I prefer a dive bezel to a chronograph, and I do. It's simply easier to keep track. That said, sometimes less is more, and in that instance, we have the 42mm stainless steel 2017 model year launch Girard-Perregaux Laureato Skeleton, or open worked. It is very much what you get with an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak open work. We really should call it open wrought. But this watch is, in almost every regard, a better deal than the AP, while giving up very little in horological or artistic relevance. Now, the watch came out in 17, and it's nicely proportioned, 42 millimeters, but again with a sort of integrated case profile that makes it look larger, just like the Rolex. It's 10.9 millimeters thick, so it's surprisingly slender. Now, the watch is also 100 meters water resistant, which is something the Royal Oak open worked definitely isn't, and there is no Patek Philippe equivalent to this watch. So you're talking about a very compelling total package. We'll throw it on the wrist real quick. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference. Like the Rolex, it's nice and broad. I would even say it wears a bit smaller on the wrist, as it's definitely thinner by a good margin. You can see that with the naked eye. Because the lugs do arc around the edge of your wrist, it wears far better and more easily on a small wrist than, say, the Royal Oak 41, which does feel truly huge. Putting the watch a little bit closer to the lens and calling up my zoom magnification, you can see the caliber 1800-0006 really is quite special. First, the dial is entirely open, and you can see that not only has it been finished by hand, but not only do we have those beautiful rolled bevels and chamfers, we also have those sharp interior angles where creases are formed by the junction of two rounded bevels. You'll also note the dial is entirely nickel anthracite, and then it has a circumferential and concentric brushing pattern over its surfacing. The barrel is open. The spokes of the barrel have been polished on their flanks with their own miniature anglage and then satinated on their tops. You can see the escapement as well as the balance wheel, and then the fourth wheel features an extended pinion for the seconds sand. The dial is fully loomed and easy to read at night. Now, this, of course, isn't one of the 3000 series Girard-Perregaux movements. Let me turn it a little bit so you have a better view in the light. This is actually the longer-legged and higher-tech caliber 1800 family, which means you're getting 54 hours of power reserve rather than 46. And you can see that the finishing on the reverse side is even more impressive, as the entirety of the rotor has been hand-finished, skeletonized, beveled on its edge, all screws handsomely black polished on their tops, and you can see there are those sharp inward creases. You have those inward angles and dozens of them on this movement. That is one of the most difficult assignments for a finisseur, a person who creates the fine finish on a watch. It does have hacking or stop seconds, so this watch is absolutely stacked with capability, very easy to wear, and built just as admirably as any Audemars Piguet, as the movement features no compromise in finish and is very, very special. You also note one of the features of the Laureato has always been that the bezel actually screws into the case, so it's not just a styling element, it's a physical fixture that helps to achieve the 100-meter water resistance. And since the very first Laureato in 1975, we've had this wonderful tradition of integration, and while that's lately very cool, Girard-Perregaux truthfully was doing it before Patek Philippe, IWC, and Vacheron. A very impressive watch and a wonderful tribute to Girard-Perregaux's heritage, both Laureato and high horology. Now, right here we have a watch that launched in 2020, 40.5 millimeters in stainless steel with a blue ceramic bezel. This is the Grand Seiko Spring Drive GMT SBGE 255. It is a smaller and kinder Grand Seiko Spring Drive GMT. Traditionally, these have been huge watches, over 44 millimeters and nearly unwearable to a smaller wrist. For 2020, everything got a whole lot more compact. Still 200 meters water resistant, still 3-day power reserve, still accurate to plus or minus 15 seconds a month, and of course still equipped with the second time zone complication and the power reserve indicator. At 40.5 millimeters and about 14 millimeters thick, this is a really easy watch to wear on a small wrist. It is ideal for travelers. It's nicely loomed. It's a true sports watch, and being 200 meters, it's also quite swimmable. Caliber 9R66 inside, of course, a fascinating combination of quartz precision and mechanical soul. Though it does feature a quartz oscillator, there are no capacitors, no batteries, and there are no stepper motors in this watch. All of the energy derives from the spring, and all of the motion, including that smoothly sweeping glide of the seconds hand, derives from the energy and the force of the spring. This is a really special watch, and of course it is a hand-finished watch, as both the components on the dial and the case itself are manually finished. This is the tin plate Zaratsu finishing that Grand Seiko often mentions in its literature. It is a black polish that's applied directly to the case by holding it by hand against a spinning tin plate, and to be able to achieve these micrometrically identical bevels and facets and do all of that by eye and hand, it's not easy. It takes 3 years to learn this craft to mastery, and thus this watch, both inside the dial and externally on the case, is a handmade product. Try to find that under $10,000 from a Swiss product. Well, I have a handmade Swiss product here, but it's going to be way more than 10 grand. This launched in 2017, 44 millimeters in white gold and only 18 pieces, is the MB&F Legacy Machine Split Escapement. The logic is simple. MB&F, under Max Buser, decided to create a what-if watch in 2011. What if an MB&F wristwatch were made in the late 19th century, and the Legacy Machine was the result? The timepiece is Baroque. It is a celebration of extravagant and exuberant high horology. Let's take a look outside and then move inboard. You see the battle axe motif of MB&F on the crown. You see the same on the hybrid titanium and white gold deployant clasp. The watch is extraordinarily thick, largely due to the sapphire. It's almost, again, as thick as the case, and the whole thing is 18 millimeters, though it doesn't wear that large because you can see it's sloped. It's more domed than thick. The timepiece does feature a combination of satin finish, note vertical on the lugs, longitudinal on the case, polishing on the lug hoods, as well as the concave bezel. There is a pusher adjuster that allows you to quickly and easily cycle the pointer date that's down at 8 o'clock. All of the subdials are lacquered, and then the dial base is actually rusticated with a wire brush to create this rough graining. It is repeatedly dabbed with a wire brush, a rigid wire brush, until this rough surface has been created. Then it is PVD coated with a translucent coating that gives it a metallic sheen while preserving the visibility of the underlying texture. The balance is 14 millimeters in diameter, and as you can see, it's a recessed bolt aerodynamic balance that is designed for variable polar moments, so you can regulate it by moving the inertia nuts in or out. It beats weight 18,000 vibrations per hour, and as you you can see there is an enormous extended balance staff that extends from the escapement on the reverse side. So you wind up with this split escapement, with the regulator being on the dial, but the actual escape mechanism being on the reverse side. You can also see that the balance bridge here is remarkably elaborate, huge, vaulted and arcing. It's entirely black polished, and you can see that the balance is free sprung for durability with a handmade overcoil, so in any position it beats concentrically and keeps even time. Stephen McDonnell was the primary friend here. Stephen McDonnell helping to advise on the creation of this system, which, due to the size of the balance and the length of the balance staff, required extra energy. So the 3-day power reserve is provided by 2 separate mainspring barrels. Note that there is a pocket watch style swan's neck extended click spring, and then immense mirrored bevels, and I'm talking Philippe Dufour level bevels, broad, mirrored, so shiny and easy to resolve that you don't need a loop to appreciate them. Luminous Côte de Genève pivot jewels in golden chaton, and you can see 1, 2, 3 sharp interior angles with satination on the wheels and then engine turning on the base plate. It is truly surpassing in its beauty. If you look, you can even see that the spokes and inner circumference of the drivetrain wheels have been mirror polished and beveled. This is as good as it gets. And of course, only 18 pieces made, as you see here, in white gold with the blue dial. It's not a hard watch to wear. It's only about 51 millimeters lug to lug, so if you can wear a Rolex Daytona on a bracelet, you can wear this. You can also see how it doesn't seem too thick on the wrist, even though the measurement at 18 millimeters sounds outrageous. The fact is, it doesn't quite wear that large. The lugs are short and tightly downturned. They turn almost 90 degrees from the horizontal sweep of the case band. So even on my smallish wrist, this watch is wearing well, and I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference. We're going to stick with our high horology, independent horology kick. I was at SIHH in 2017 when this watch debuted, 42 millimeters in a combination of sapphire and grade 5 titanium. This is the 88-piece limited edition Christophe Claret Maestro. A remarkable bubble-like profile gives way to a dial that is entirely open, with the DMC 16 movement being effectively all on the dial side. You can see there's an open mainspring barrel that allows you to see the coiling of the mainspring, and this is sort of a unofficial power reserve. As you can tell by the coil roughly how wound it is. It has a 7-day power reserve. It has an extravagantly broad and tall balance cock structure that features a sapphire capstone, and then a remarkable black polished proprietary micrometric regulation device. You can see that it does feature a free sprung, well, it's not free sprung, pardon me, it does feature curb pins, but it features a recessed bolt balance where the primary adjustment will be done using those recessed bolts. So you can use the curb pins or you can use the bolts on the balance to change the inertia. There's a double-digit date with a conical profile down at approximately 5 o'clock on the dial. Let's see if it's in the midst of the turnover. There you go. It is an instantaneous midnight date change, and you can see that there is a pusher on the side that allows you to rapidly cycle it, and it is a ball to do so. You can see there are additional sapphire capstones, and this one sits atop a memory device. The idea here, and this is Christophe Claret's rationale, it's like a knotted handkerchief. By changing, and you can see there is a diamond facet, the facet facing the owner. When you look down at your watch, especially if the diamond is present, you will know that there is something that you had to remember. You will then recall and perform the task. As you can see, the watch is extravagant in its form with the dramatically cambered bubble-like sapphire, and you can see that this watch is resolutely resistant to scratches. Not only is grade 5 time more scratch resistant than steel, but with the sapphire being second only to diamond and in a position to take any hits that might scuff or scratch the case, you've got a big heat shield for the finish of your watch right here. On the reverse side, you can see il est en français, or I should say elle est en français, la montre, and everything's blackened with black polished screws, satination on the wheels, and you can see that the timepiece truly is handsomely made but distinctly different on each side. Throwing the watch on the wrist real quick, I can tell you it's very light. Titanium and sapphire are both very light materials, so this watch, being neither a $100,000 timepiece nor oversized, was very different from past Christophe Claret pieces back in 2017, and I believe this is Christophe Claret's most roundly desirable watch that he's made under his own name and with his own manufacturer. Let's take a look at the loom shot, because it is loomed. You got a little bit of loom, not a whole ton, but you've got just enough to get the job done. And you can see right here, we've got the Grand Seiko Spring Drive GMT, because I know you were wondering, this is also a true sports watch like the Rolex seen earlier. And heck, let's do the Laureato. I promised you a fully loomed Laureato skeleton, and that is what I deliver. All right, I have something that represents a rare treat, even for someone in my line of work, something that represents the ultimate opportunity for a savvy collector who knows that it's often best to buy the best when it surfaces. And that is exactly what we have right here. 3 times FP Journe Black Label watches, a series launched in 2008 to provide the ultimate in exclusivity, as only FP Journe boutiques and espaces can sell these watches, but unlike the rose gold black dial boutique editions, these could only be purchased by those who had previously purchased new FP Journe watches. Well, there is absolutely no cordon here. You do not need to be an existing Journe customer to buy 1, 2, or all 3 of these Black Label watches. And I should mention, no more than 2 of any given Black Label model can be made in any given year, further increasing the exclusivity. Let's start with the most basic and work our way up to probably the most involved. 40 millimeters by only 8.8 millimeters thick in platinum. This is the Chronomat Souverain Black Label. Caliber 1304, as you can see inside the platinum case. Caliber 1304 is entirely in rose gold, and this is a rare piece because it features the Parisian-made Eleanor cases with Eleanor's maker's mark and the French hallmarks, and that stopped. Those French-made cases stopped at FP Journe in mid-2008, and 2008 was also the year the Black Label launched. So to get one that represents both Black Label and an Eleanor case, that's a real rarity, and unusual and difficult combination to achieve, as there was so little overlap between those 2 eras of Journe production. Now, the movement is extraordinarily beautiful, and you can see there's a hidden train, so you can't see the drivetrain that runs from the barrels over to the escapement. You can see there's a broad channel between them. The rose gold is handsomely finished in several finishes. As you can see, linear Côte de Genève, mirrored chamfering. There's a graining and radial satin pattern that emanates out from under the barrels, and then there's engine turning below the balance, which is free-sprung, oversized with immense inertia. As you can see, the Chronomat Souverain uses a power reserve indicator that runs backward, like a vintage marine chronometer or navigation clock. When it was important to wind every 24 hours on the nose, it was more important to know how long since the system was last wound, and so navigation chronometers would always indicate 0 when they had been fully wound, and when they indicated 24, it was time to wind them. Let's throw this one on my wrist. It is very easy to wear. All of these watches feature 20 millimeter spacings between the lugs and 48 millimeter lug-to-lug dimensions, and all of these watches are 40 millimeters. So if you can wear one, you can wear all 3 of them. This is the ultimate opportunity to acquire an overwhelmingly cool and unqualified success in collecting FP Journe. You will have basically the perfect trio if you pick these up as a group. Now you can see right here, I'm going to get a little bit closer, the Tourbillon Souverain Black Label gives you everything you expect from the Tourbillon Souverain, starting with the 1-minute tourbillon itself. As with the Chronomat Souverain, it features a power reserve indicator that runs backward, indicating 0 when fully wound. Let's see what I can do to show you that tourbillon carriage. There we go. You can see it's entirely black polished. The tourbillon carriage cock atop it is rounded and polished. There's a deadbeat second system. It is both free-sprung and equipped with an overcoil hairspring, and that's really the key to the accuracy of this watch. The overcoil hairspring, which provides concentric beating of the hairspring in any position, as well as the remontoire d'égalité, the constant force spring. You can see the titanium spring, first coined as a concept on a tourbillon wristwatch in 1991 by FP Journe. The idea is to provide a little spring that's a buffer between the barrel and the escapement. So for the first 28 hours of operation, the energy is being provided only indirectly by the barrel, and is being provided directly to the escapement by this spring and its little separate escapement system. So this is basically a buffer power reserve that ensures the same amount of energy reaches the escapement each second. For the first 28 hours, this watch maintains constant balance amplitude. That, along with the hairspring architecture, more than the tourbillon really, ensures absolute regularity and allows this watch to be tuned to incredible chronometric resolution. Now you can see on the wrist, it is truly imposing. Deadbeat seconds on the front, 1-minute tourbillon adjacent, a handsome bilaterally symmetrical dial. You can split it down the center and it's symmetrical. That is true of very few Journe watches. A very special piece, and again, rose gold inside, platinum outside. You feel where the money went in that watch. Now this is easily the most special of the 3. As you know, the Resonance 4, the first full redesign of the FP Journe Chronomat à résonance since 2009 was only available for 2019. This was a one-year model. It has the balanced dial layout of the first two generations of resonance watch, but you can see that one of them is in a 24-hour format so that you can still use this as a travel watch with a reference time, but you don't get the asymmetry that came along after 2009 with the 24-hour scrolling display. This is a watch made for 1 year, and you got to remember any version of this watch, the Resonance 4 from 2019, is going to be rare. To get a black label example, that is exceptional. Remember, you can only get a handful of any given model built per year, regardless of demand. So this is an exclusive piece. Note the attention to detail, as all of these 2019 Resonance models were built with blueprinting on the dials to signify that they were something special in the Journe universe. Now you can also see that there is a flyback system, so you can synchronize the seconds hands. Resonance, and I'll start to wind this watch. It's a bullhead winder, in case you're wondering, but resonance requires about 7 to 10 minutes to take effect once the watch has been started up. You wind both barrels and both sides using one crown. The crown in its intermediate position sets the sides independently. It is a true dual time, amongst other things. I'll show you that reset one more time. Now on the reverse side, you can see how it works. 2 mainspring barrels, 2 drivetrains, 2 escapements, 2 balances. There is no physical coupling between them. Rather, it is the parasitic loss of energy to friction and vibration, and that energy radiates out. And as with metronomes or pendulums, the 2 balances will eventually synchronize to each other because those emanations mutually reinforce sort of synchronized dance. And this has a benefit. If one speeds up or slows down because of shock or position, the other one will help to bring it back into line, so it self-regulates via resonance. This was a system introduced by FP Journe on a production wristwatch in 2000. It was a world premiere, the first time this had ever been done. You can see there's a little gold pinion, and right next to that a black polished rack with a tightening set screw. And so you can actually change the distance between the 2 balance cocks in order to fine-tune the resonance phenomenon. And of course, once more, you see this is a beautifully finished 18-karat rose gold movement in a platinum case, and it is very, very special. 1 is good, 2 is better, 3 is best. If you want the brass ring in FP Journe collecting, platinum is the way to go, and black label is the best way to buy platinum at Journe. Invest in platinum, invest in the black labels. These are the best looking, in my opinion, Journe watches made. Not only are they special, they are genuinely good looking, and that is not something I always say about Journe watches, but these are sexy. That said, sometimes you want the look, but maybe you don't have quite the budget. Well, the good news is JaegerLeCoultre is a true high horology manufacturer. La Grande Maison, the watchmaker's watchmaker, famed for building movements for other brands, including the Holy Trinity. But JLC has long built its own watches too and offered outstanding value and complications. Here we have the 37mm stainless steel 1996 to 2005 Master Perpetual Calendar. It has the IWC Kurt Klaus Perpetual Calendar system. Using the pusher adjuster over at 8 o'clock, you have the ability to step the date, which moves the day, which moves the month, which moves the year, the decade, even the moon phase. Everything's mechanically programmed. All you do is step it until it represents the correct date, and everything else moves in sync. You don't have to look up the moon phase or check the combination. Now, the watch is also powered by a JLC 889 base movement. It has the legendary IWC Kurt Klaus designed perpetual calendar, and then underneath, one of the all-time great ultra-thin high horology automatic movements. It's a tractor with good torque to drive the perpetual calendar system, and as you can see, there is no compromise here. We have true fired blued screws, a combination of machine finish and hand finish overall, but nicely executed. Note the use of a 22-karat mass on the rotor, not 21 carats, not 18, and God help us, not tungsten. No compromises made. If you look, you can also see that it was adjusted to 6 positions. Remember, the chronometer standard is 5. What you'll see on a Vacheron, for example, is 5. Here, 6 position adjustment, which gives deviation and imprecision no place to hide. No expense spared, you get a full deployment clasp, and the watch is made of stainless steel, which means you're getting into this watch at a hugely attractive price, and you're paying for the watchmaking, for the horology, not for precious metal. There is no precious metal premium here, and the watch has the durability of a steel watch to resist scratches and scuffs the way a gold or platinum watch could not. It's easy to wear on any wrist, And I would call it a viable unisex option. If you're a lady with a taste for high horology, you're not into quartz, you're not into diamonds, you want a man's watch, but you want one that fits. This is a great option for him and for her, because on a man's wrist, it's traditionally sized and elegant. On a lady's wrist, it's a nice, secure, proper fit and handsomely proportional. This is in the best interests of almost every watch collector, and as a perpetual calendar, it does not need to be reset until the year 2100. Let's consider two Breitlings, two unconventional and attractive Breitling watches. Let's start with the Chronomat 42. This is a model that came out in 2020, and it was a throwback to 1984, with the revival of the Chronomat following a year of consultation with the Italian Frecce Tricolore, the Italian military aerobatic demonstration squadron. Think Red Arrows, think Blue Angels, think Thunderbirds. But 1 year later, after that experimentation, the Schneider family relaunched the Chronomat. Previously, it had been a circular slide rule watch launched in the 1940s. After 1984, it became a watch very much like what you see here, a sporting chronograph with an aviation bent but broad sporting viability. Now, the watch, of course, is handsome, 42 millimeters. The calling card of the redesign is really the rouleau bracelet, which you can see has small cross sections for individual links, and then a lovely taper, a handsome bevel along the edges or the shoulders of the links. Then you can see they stagger the intermediates, alternating with and without the polished intermediates. The clasp is double deployment with twin trigger actuation, and the case is handsomely made with a lovely bevel that runs the full length on each side, and handsomely tapered lugs that give the watch a bit of a cushion case profile. You can see the crown guard structure is handsomely made with oval section pushers and high polish, and then there's polish on the top of the guards and the bottom, but satin finish longitudinally. You have one of the Chronomat signatures from 1983 and 84, which is this onion-style crown, and then you have another one in the rider tabs of the bezel. The idea being it makes the bezel easier to grip when your hands might be gloved. Now, though the watch is aviation themed, it is a unidirectional rotating dive style bezel, so you can line that up with the minute hand. The watch is 200 meters water resistant. You can actually take this diving. Now, the timepiece also features a captive bezel, so you can see the bezel is held on by screws. That's a feature that's also shared with Zinn watches. It means that you can't accidentally snap the bezel off no matter how hard the impact. You must remove the screws first if you want to remove the bezel. The dial is handsome with tone-on-tone colors. Georges Kern at Breitling wants you to think in-house caliber when you see black on blue or any tone-on-tone dial. The blue sunburst is handsome, and note the use of the new Breitling B logo shorn of its wings up at 12 o'clock. We've got the 36, well, this is the 47 jewel, my mistake, 47 jewel, a date version of the B01. It's a column wheel vertical clutch chronometer certified 3-day power reserve automatic chronograph, and it has, well, I guess I'll have to wind it up. It has a very sharp and positive column wheel feel. I'd compare it to the best in the business, the Zenith El Primero caliber 400 and the Rolex Daytona caliber 4130, in terms of how the column wheel function selector for the chronograph actually feels. It is very positive, sharp, and precise. There's no mistaking this for a column wheel chronograph. And then you've got the vertical clutch. If you prefer to just leave your chronograph running, you can do that with a vertical clutch, no hazard to the watch. And of course, because of the vertical clutch, there's no jump or stagger to the seconds hand. As a 200-meter unidirectional rotating bezel watch, this is a viable diving chronograph if you want it to be. You could see, because of the rouleau bracelet, however, it's also an elegant watch that could be your pilot's timepiece or even your dress chronograph. It's certainly up to the task in either regard, and it's not terribly huge across the wrist at about 51 millimeters. It's not as large as you would anticipate previous eras of 42 millimeter Breitlings being. So this is a handsome and versatile watch, and one that I like a good deal. Now let's talk about another one that came out in 2020. This one's a limited edition, 1,000 pieces. This is the Breitling Premier Bentley Mulliner Limited Edition. Now you can see here, and this is kind of why I reversed myself a moment ago when talking about the 36 jewel count. This watch does feature the 36 jewel B01 because it is a no-date dial. That makes it distinct from the standard Premiers. It's cleaned up, it's more symmetrical, it's handsome, and it's a limited edition of 1,000 celebrating, well, Mulliner, which is the old-fashioned coach builder that worked for many years with Bentley before being acquired by Bentley Rolls-Royce in 1959. Since then, it has been sort of an in-house customization arm for Bentley, and this watch is a tribute to that facet of Bentley history. You can also see that there's a lovely vertical satin finish. It's almost like stainless steel to the dial, but it's more of a silver white than pure silver. Lovely applique indices and numerals. There's a handsome track inboard for reading the seconds and fractions of second, and then outboard there's a tachymeter scale calibrated to an unusually high 700 units, so you can time a Bentley race car, let's say, over a standing kilometer or mile. There are no units given, so it can be a kilometer or a mile. It's there to gauge the speed of an object over a fixed distance. The watch has a 3-day power reserve, column wheel, vertical clutch, stop seconds, chronometer certification, and it is 100 meters water resistant, which on a different strap is perfectly suitable for swimming. It's a 42, which means it's large, but it's not huge. It's a full-size men's watch rather than an oversized watch. And of course, it has that lovely engine-turned Bentley plaque on the flank to remind you that this engine-turning motif has a long history with Bentley road and racing cars, especially bespoke custom cars today, and it is a very handsome watch with a lovely wraparound to the bevel at the edge of the individual lugs. And of course, the strap, like all Breitling watches, is far more substantial and premium than you would expect in this price point. It's really impressive, and as you can see, it is a Breitling factory strap in like new condition. This was a white whale back in 2019, a watch that Audemars Piguet initially didn't even want to talk about. They soft launched this Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph 26480 Ti at SIHH, and they really didn't want to talk about it at SIHH. I was there, I asked. The watch was such a sea change in terms of movement and style, it seemed like something they would roll out with a bit of pomp and circumstance. Instead, they actually launched it and then hid the prototypes away before acknowledging a few days later that yes, in fact, this would be a 2019 model. Why the tergiversation? Why the conflict? Well, this watch is a test balloon. It's a very quiet attempt to gauge consumer reaction to changes in the design of the 42mm offshore. So the watch is grade 5 titanium 42mm, but impressively only 12.9 millimeters thick. It is only, get this, it is only 1/2 of a millimeter thicker than a Daytona. And that's because for the first time in a long while, we're getting a Royal Oak Offshore with an integrated chronograph movement. And this is the first men's Royal Oak Offshore chronograph to feature an integrated as opposed to a modular Royal Oak chronograph caliber. So the watch is still 100 meters water resistant, but let's talk about the changes. As you can see, everything on the pusher side changes, the crown changes. You can see that there are shoulders in blue lacquer, that changes. The shape of the shearing guards around the crown and the pushers, that changes. The old circular ceramic pushers are gone, replaced by faceted and elongated polished and satin pieces in titanium. You can see that inboard of the bezel, which remains the same, you have, instead of a tachymeter outboard, a haute for gauging minutes and seconds, and then inboard of that, the hands have broad shoulders. As you can see, they're much thicker in the midsection than the previous baton hands. So too has the set of registers changed, not just the individual designs, but note that they've been rotated 90 degrees from the previous 12, 9, and 6 orientation. Now it's a conventional tri-compacts and balanced design, and you can see that the date now sits between 4 and 5 because this is a Frédéric Piguet 1185 movement. The caseback has also changed in design, and again, with 12.9 millimeters of thickness, this is one of the thinnest Royal Oak offshores of all time, rivaling the Vempe and Scuba divers from the 2000s, which, remember, used just a JLC 889. Those were not modular. This is a fully integrated chronograph that has column wheel, vertical clutch, automatic winding, and chronograph components all in one plane. So with the absence of a DD chronograph module here, you can make the watch properly thin to easily fit on a smaller wrist. It's not so much that the watch shrinks from side to side, but with a combination of a thinner case and titanium construction, it feels so much lighter. With the diver strap, it's suitable for a wrist even as small as mine. And as you can see, this example is immaculate with the bevels, and let me show you some of these bevels, as well as the breaks between planes remaining razor sharp. Nothing has been touched on this case. You can see we have done nothing to refinish it. We will do nothing to refinish it. This is all as it emerged from Les Brassus. And of course, being a Royal Oak Offshore restore all of these little facets and distinctions between satin and polish, rounded and straight, curves and creases, laid down by hand. The timepiece also features a lovely blue tone to the dial, and here's a new feature that debuted on this model. You can see that the bezel gasket is a color to match the dial as well as the strap, and that color coordination is another new feature being trialed in this test balloon watch. It remains 100 meters water resistant, so you can absolutely go swimming with it. It is a very impressive timepiece, and if you're wondering about the Rolex Piguet in this watch, keep this in mind. It's finished to a high horology standard. It's adjusted in 5 positions. It is a historically great movement that powered generations of the Royal Oak chronograph, as well as the Vacheron Constantin overseas chronograph. It is a high horology movement in a high horology watch, and if you were to take this case off and look at it, you would agree on the basis of finish and architecture, it belongs. And here's a loom shot. As you can see, no shortage. This is truly a day or night sports watch. But I saved the best for last. This, made from 2002 to 2006, was the first chronometer certified generation of the Omega Deville Central Tourbillon. 38.7 millimeters in ultra white platinum. It has the handsome fluted and shouldered lugs of vintage mid-century Omega watches, like for example the 2637. Immense sculptural beauty and personality in a sub 39 millimeter watch. This one takes no prisoners. Of course, a system designed by the great watchmaker Maurice Grimm. It is a centrally located flying tourbillon, no upper bridge to obscure it. It features an overcoil hairspring fired blue, and as you can see, the entire tourbillon assembly is immaculately hand finished. You can also see some of the styling tricks designed to pare down the apparent mass of the watch, as half of the bezel is flat and then half of it is domed. You can see there's a guilloche dial sitting beneath 2 superimposed sapphire discs that orbit the center of the watch, and they actually act as your hour and minute displays. But the watch, as with the Audemars Piguet Tourbillon Automatique, designed in 1986 by Maurice Grimm, it features a case-back settings system. So the watch features a setting system on the reverse side that allows you to rotate those orbital sapphires that indicate the time. You'll also appreciate the fact that the watch does have a crown, but it doesn't pull out, and you wind it using this crown. There's no setting done with this crown. You simply turn it, and you turn it counterclockwise to wind the watch, but you don't have to. Underneath the image of the god Kronos, you have a caliber 2600B, which was the first version of Omega's Central Tourbillon to get a COSC certificate. 48 joules, automatic winding, 45-hour power reserve, which is impressive given the power-intensive complication. It has made its way through the COSC certification and received a chronometer certificate, and it is both gorgeous and a true feat of chronometry. There are no compromises here. A watch that is as accurate as it is beautiful, with a full white gold point clasp. It is white gold, the watch is platinum. Throwing it on the wrist, you can see this is a Grail watch and a tourbillon suited to a human-sized wrist. And again, you're not going to find a better tourbillon for the money from a company that will be around forever to service it and provide parts. I cannot do any better than this, guys. My heart is skipping beats here. I'm gonna have to get a pacemaker if I continue this video. Please take this off my desk. It doesn't get any better than this, and I am absolutely starstruck. This was one of the horological heroes of my youth, and now in my hand, knowing they made only a few dozen of these per year, I'm seriously tempted. Guys, please, you know what to do. Reach out to Tim Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.